Hey guys, this is Sackov. Hello and welcome to another Mandalorian review episode. And the first 30 seconds of this video will be spoiler free. After that, you guys gotta get out if you haven't seen the episode yet, or if you want to avoid spoilers. And I'll just say the episode was really good, probably one of my top 4 or so. But that's all you're getting. Go watch it. If you're watching the other ones, why wouldn't you watch this one and then come back in 45 minutes or whenever after you have? With that being said, let's get into it. Chapter 11 of The Mandalorian, Season 2, Episode 3 was called The Heiress, and it will be a very substantial episode in this season moving forward. I think that's probably putting things mildly. Of course, The Mandalorian up to this point has been trying to find connections, a way to get Baby Yoda back to the Jedi, and he took another step forward in this episode as he met Katan, of course, as played by Sakhoff, and other members of the Night Owls. So I'm excited about this, but I'm also getting a little bit worried. We'll talk about that in a moment, but first of all, I want to just mention everything else about the episode that I disliked, or I think mostly that I liked, because there was a lot about this episode other than kind of the main features, which I really loved. First of all, this is a real change of scenery for The Mandalorian. We're not visiting some backwater sand planet today. We're going to, again, another planet in the Outer Rim, but a pretty industrialized ocean planet with, a lot going on there. There's that one scene where the Mandalorian's Razor Crest is falling towards the planet. We get a good look at the city that he's heading towards, and it is quite expansive. I really enjoy seeing the Mon Calamari and the Quarren all dressed up as fishermen. I suspect we'll get some more information about this planet, which I believe is called Trask later on. Maybe it is some sort of Mon Calamari colony world or something like that, but it would also be a shame, I think, if this episode was the only appearance of Trask. There were lots of really cool details too. There's ships in the background, of course, the walker/crane thing, which helped lift the Razor's Crest out of the ocean. All of that was great. The only thing I wish, funny enough, is that we would have got to see more, actual fishing done, just some weird Star Wars sea creatures being hauled out of the ocean or sold at vendors. It would have been nice to walk through a little market or something, because those have been some of my favorite moments of The Mandalorian, just kind of that world building and exploring. And I think it was maybe a bit of that which kept the episode from being, number 1 for me. I love the episodes that are action-packed, but I kind of find myself even preferring the ones that are slower and a bit westerny. I think a good example of that would probably be episode 2. I really loved that one. Episode 1, of course, was action-packed, but maybe less story-driven than this one, and I probably preferred that, although these were both phenomenal, because episode 1 brought us to a pretty interesting location on Tatooine, and had lots of cool details regarding the Krayt Dragon and whatever else, but that's just my opinion. This will be the favorite episode of a lot of people, I'm sure, because of the inclusion of Star Wars, Clone Wars, and Rebels characters. While we're talking about small scenes, I really enjoyed the cantina bit. I thought it was funny that they had a seafood chowder nozzle attached to the ceiling. Although I will say some of the Mon Calamari and the Quarren didn't sound exactly like I expected them to, but whatever. 2 more final points really I want to touch on before we get into the big parts of today's episode. I loved the stuff with the Gozanti cruiser. I thought that ship was rendered absolutely beautifully. I mean, they started those models, I believe, back first with Star Wars Rebels and the Clone Wars, and now lots of those models have been translated to live action. I believe Gozanti's may have been in for the Battle of Exegol, I'm not sure, but the model looked phenomenal. It was really cool to see, something that's existed in Star Wars lore be used in a realistic way. The only thing I'm a bit bummed about is that we didn't get to see Moff Gideon's fleet, but I suspect we will sometime soon. Moff Gideon is definitely a bit more powerful of a warlord than I expected. I mean, all of The Mandalorian has basically taken place in the same area of space, so it makes sense that Moff Gideon is still the one who's powerful here, but I wouldn't have expected for him to have that many ships, so pretty interesting. Finally, this episode will have done nothing to dispel the egg gate controversy. There were some theories that, Baby Yoda may have just been holding the eggs in his stomach to regurgitate them later, although I thought it was pretty clear that he had eaten them. I will say I love Frog Lady. She's a super fun character, and it was nice to have some touching moments between her and her frog husband. Alright, so now let's get into the meat of things, and of course, the main thing that people will be talking about this episode will be Sakhoff returning as Bo-Katan, who was a character that first appeared, of course, in Star Wars The Clone Wars as a member of Death Watch, then was fleshed out a bit more in Star Wars Rebels. First of all, Sakhoff voiced Bo-Katan before, and she looks pretty much perfect as a live-action translation of the character. I'm really glad they decided to bring her back. I mean, it was a pretty easy choice, but the scenes of her were phenomenal. I thought that her armor translated super well into live action. That was probably the coolest part, seeing her in the other Mandalorian members who actually do get names, at least in the subtitles of the episode, spring into action. They had their own little theme, which was pretty, I don't even know how I would explain it. It reminds me of a scene from Annihilation, funny enough, because it's got the sort of same rhythm. But yeah, it was pretty striking every time they went into action, and they made the Mandalorian even seem a little bit slow at some point. And we get the revelation that the Mandalorian, we knew that he was a part of Death Watch, but we see Death Watch in the Clone Wars take off their helmets and whatever else. So we knew something had changed, and it's revealed now that he was a part of Children of the Watch, which kind of explains why the Mandalorian, Din Djarin, is so different from every other Mandalorian we've seen. He's been brainwashed, I guess, into this maybe ultra-conservative or at least non-currently mainstream offshoot of Mandalorian culture. Now, I'm not sure how I feel about this. I do think it makes sense. I'm not sure if it diminishes his character in any way, or characters like the Armorer to be essentially part of this cult. But I mean, Mandalorians are always pretty weird anyway, so I guess it is what it is. It should be interesting to see how the Mandalorian interacts with other Mandalorians moving forward, and I'm curious to see, I guess, how his character changes moving forward, whether he'll join mainstream Mandalorian society, or whether he'll stick to his ways but maybe loosen them a bit, or not at all. I personally think the Mandalorian, like the character's creed and his ethos, are interesting, so I don't want to see him, join Bo-Katan and try to fight for Mandalore and get her on the throne, because I just don't think that's very interesting for this show, at least, and we'll get more to that in just a second. But the other big revelation is that now the Mandalorian is looking for Ahsoka Tano, who of course Bo-Katan knows, and that will presumably be the plot of next week's episode, which will mark the midway point of the season, at least the end of the episode. Well, there's 8 episodes. Alright, so Bo-Katan was cool. The Mandalorians together were really cool. The scenes of them fighting on the Gazanti were well done, even though the stormtroopers didn't offer much resistance. They weren't exactly very intelligent tactically. But I do worry a little bit, as I talked about before this season started, that the Mandalorian may get pushed off its own course into something else. I don't want the Mandalorian to become the Star Wars Rebels sequel series. I want the Star Wars Rebels sequel series to deal with that. I want the Mandalorian to be the show it has been and to follow the plot course that it started in season 1. And how the rest of this season plays out will determine largely how I feel about this episode. If it turns out that Bo-Katan, does go her own way after this episode and doesn't return, then I'm fine with that. But if this show becomes centered around her trying to get the Darksaber back from Moff Gideon, or even if that becomes a major 2-episode arc or whatever else, I'm just not going to be super impressed. And same with the Ahsoka thing. Yes, it's really cool that Ahsoka will be in live action and that the Mandalorian will be going to meet her presumably, but I don't want this show to become focused on her. I think everything is going to be okay. I think that Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau and everyone working on this show know what we want to see and are probably using this as a way to kind of drum up interest in future live action and animated projects. But I'm really curious to hear what you guys think about that and how you'd like to see the Mandalorian kind of handle other characters moving forward. I will say, it's great to see people just uniformly excited about something Star Wars. Again, I've talked about this pretty much since episode 1 of The Mandalorian, but it's nice going on Twitter or wherever else and just seeing people excited and happy and, pumped to see where these characters go and talking about the newest revelation of the episode. I will say, there's 2 things though about this show that are starting to bug me. First of all, episode length. Now, if they gotta keep this episodes this short to keep the fluff out, alright, I get it. But I really enjoyed the 50-minute runtime of episode 1. I thought that was like a perfect sweet spot, and I think that's one reason why I really like that episode so much, because we did go on a huge journey. This episode could have done with a little bit more in the way of runtime, even 5 or 10 minutes, interactions between the Mandalorian and Bo-Katan, or more exploring of the planet or whatever else. It still felt like a long 30 minutes, like there was a lot in there, but I just want more in runtime from the episodes. Second, and this has nothing to do with the show itself, Disney Plus needs to move this show to a more reasonable launch time. There's no reason why this show has to come out at 12 o'clock Pacific time. That's really early or late for a lot of people. I'd say the vast majority of people watching The Mandalorian, or at least a lot of them, are in that North American and Western Europe kind of time zone. I think the hype of this show, even if it came out like 4 hours earlier, but ideally at like 8 o'clock Eastern time, would be just that much more. I mean, even from a marketing standpoint, right now, The Mandalorian is dominating social media at 3 a.m. Eastern time in the morning. That just makes no sense. People would be a lot more likely to have watch parties and, discussion threads and whatever else if the episode is being presented at a time when most people were not asleep. I don't know, that's just my opinion, as has been everything in this video. Again, sorry the production quality isn't quite up to where it usually is. As I've said, I've got a new baby, and I wasn't even expecting to get this much work done, but she's been an absolute dream. Like, she sleeps so well, and she's not difficult at all, so I've got about 2 hours a night to get down to work. So nice, a little bit more. But guys, until next time, have a good one, be safe, and may the Force be with you.